programs. For those of you that are maybe joining a sales assembly program for the first time, the real quick 20-second spiel is we're an all-in-one membership-based platform based here in Chicago for the revenue organizations of some of the best B2B technology and software companies throughout the country. Since starting back in 2017, we've welcomed in close to 140 companies into our community, consisting of the likes of companies like Upwork, Glassdoor, Sprout Social, G2, and the list goes on and on. And really what we've done is we've set out to create more or less a one-stop shop for just about everything that sales and revenue teams are looking for as they continue to scale. So from over 120 learning and development events a year to certification programs to various peer communities for literally every persona within the revenue organization, to access to talent for all the roles that you're hiring for, help with sales enablement, strategy, resources, and everything in between. It's a really neat model. And over the past couple of months, we've made the decision to take what we're doing traditionally that has been here in Chicago and start to expand nationally. So we've begun to bring on companies now all over the country, and we're excited to continue our growth and continue doing some cool and innovative things here in the space of B2B tech sales and revenue growth. So that's just a little bit about us. Everyone will get a follow-up email after the program today, not for a sales pitch, but for another offer to have a couple of your reps join us for a really great training session that we have coming up later in July. So because you're joining us for today's program, everybody will be given a couple of tickets for a program that we have coming up that is intended for account executives and senior BDRs and SDRs. So keep on the lookout for that after the event today. Again, just to kind of recap what today's program is about, the theme is scaling smarter. So really what we're going to be talking about is a whole bunch of different ideas, from leadership to go-to-market strategies to sales enablement to revenue operations and everything in between. But the common theme is going to be ideas, tactics, and strategies around how B2B tech companies in today's environment can really do all the necessary things to build and scale in a smarter and more sustainable way. Obviously, with everything going on in the country and the world, and then how that's impacted the business environment, it's significantly changed the way the companies are going about building and scaling. And there's different strategies that are being deployed here in Q2 2020 and beyond, and those are the types of things that we're going to be discussing today. We're starting off with a panel discussion that'll last about 35 minutes, and then we're going to open it up for live Q&A. Which you'll be able to participate in just by dropping questions into the chat or Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And then as soon as the panel's over, we're going to kick it over to John Barrows to wrap things up. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce Christina Brady, who's going to be moderating the panel discussion, and then she'll get things rolling with our panelists. So Christina is our new president here at Sales Assembly, been on the job for all of 9 days. So we just texted her this morning about 20 minutes ago and let her know that she's moderating this discussion. So just kind of we're throwing her in, and Christina's great, many years of sales leadership experience at some really great tech companies. Looking forward to the discussion. So Christina, I'm going to kick it right over to you so we can go ahead and get rolling.
Amazing. Thank you, Jeff. I'm really, really excited to be here, even early on. This is just what I love doing. So happy to be here. Like Jeff said, I'm a former MetLife Groupon Glassdoorian, and my previous company, Glassdoor, was partnered with Sales Assembly, and I led an org there and saw the incredible impact that this company had on my team and on their performance. And so when COVID gave me the opportunity to come on board, it was a no-brainer to help this scale, knowing personally how much I was impacted by what we do. So I am pleased to be here today with these incredible panelists. We have John, Trish, and Kate. I want to pass it over to each of you to talk a little bit about who you are, a little bit about your company, and then kind of a little bit of your secret sauce. So I'm just going to go in line of who I see. So Trish, could you kick it off for us?
Sure. My name is Trish Bertuzzi. I'm the CEO of the Bridge Group and author of the Sales Development Playbook. We are a services firm, been in business 22 years, focused on the B2B tech space. And our core competencies are around virtual selling, sales development, account management, inside sales, you name it, phone, web, social media, revenue and pipeline, that be us.
I love it. All that necessary BS. John, over to you.
Good morning. So my name is John Judge. I run sales for a company called Crayon, which is a competitive intelligence platform. So we do competitive intelligence in a way that no one else has ever done it before, where we take the manual and the difficult and add machine learning and AI and smart analysts and get people and businesses competitive intelligence at scale and at the level of intelligence that they've never been able to get before. I am a 3-time customer of Trish Bertuzzi and the Bridge Group, so I can tell you that all of this stuff she's talking about is true. It works. And Kate's going to be up next, and I'm a 2-time customer of Drift as well as I feel real good about developing a couple of people who are now Drift leaders as well. So I'm happy to be here and shed a little bit of light for folks.
Well, goes without saying. Kate, on to you.
Hey, everybody. I am Kate Adams, VP of Marketing over at, as John mentioned, at Drift. Specifically, I am focused on demand generation, which for Drift counts as not only all inbound marketing, but also the sales development organization at Drift as well, where we're going through an exercise of scaling that team significantly year over year. So I'm excited to join this team and talk about that. For anybody who doesn't know Drift, we're a conversational marketing platform. We are changing the way businesses buy from businesses. So making it, enabling real-time engagement when people are at their point of highest intent, and that's when they're on your website.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's dive right in. Trish, I'm going to throw a softball over to you first.
That would be good. I like softballs.
I'm going to loft it over to you. We think about this concept of scaling smart, and I think that can be subjective or objective. So when you think about what it means to scale smart, what are 1 to 2 things that come front of mind that you know are really, really important for early startup companies to really do this the right way?
So my answer is going to be different than it would have been 4 months ago or 5 months ago, because I think scaling smarter has dramatically changed by what's going on in the world. Now, what I think scaling smarter means is for companies that take a breath, look at their strategy, look at the markets they're selling to, the buyers they're selling to, the solution they're delivering, and begin to understand, are we still relevant? Are these the markets we should be pursuing? Are these the buyers? Is our message relevant? I think people who take a breath and maybe either confirm their strategy or pivot their strategy are the ones that are going to scale smarter.
That's great advice. Anybody else have something to add?
She's absolutely right. She's absolutely right. Subtle changes in messaging, subtle changes in approach. Just think about how many times we've had to adjust our messaging since March 15th to the point where now I can't stand the "in these difficult times" phrase, where you had to lead with that 6 weeks ago in every conversation and pivot and pivot and pivot. And I think Trish is spot on that you've got to really, really think long and hard about what is your ideal customer profile and pick it and drive at it real hard, because you're not going to get a lot of chances these days to make a mistake.
Yeah.
I think the one thing I would add to that is it's 100% correct. And, but I would add, and maybe it's just because I'm the demand gen data geek in the room, but I would add that the secret to picking that ICP, the secret to the trends of what's happened to your business over the last 100 days are in your data, right? Yeah. Understanding what is happening with where you're getting interest, right? So for us at Drift, we saw industries that we had never seen before, that had never had a need or desire to talk about conversational marketing, all of a sudden look up and say, holy heck, I have to digitally transform my business here as quickly as I possibly can, because otherwise this is sink or swim, right? And if we had not been looking at that data and understanding what was happening, then we would never have seen it. We'd never been able to make that pivot, change our messaging, do all the good stuff that Trish had said and John said that you should do. But like that, I think that's super, super important. I think you got to look within the data and stay close to it on an ongoing basis. The other thing is we're seeing personas that we've never seen before, but like all of that is in my data. But if I don't have access to it, if I don't know where to look, if I don't know all those things, I'm going to miss out on these opportunities.
Yeah.
Such a good point, Kate.
Mm-hmm. And John, thinking a little bit about this idea of pivoting and diving a little bit deeper. Pivoting a business looked very different 4 months ago than it does right now. And everyone had to make this radical pivot just to fit the landscape and what was happening. As you think about what it was like to adapt and scale as this pandemic has hit, talk about those shifts and those pivots and what was surprising that happened.
Sure. So as an organization, Crayon, we were on Zoom every day. We're an inside sales organization. So the idea of closing your laptop and opening it up in another location was really not foreign to us. Taking your monitor and everything on your desk which remember the days when we all went home and we were only going to be there for 2 or 3 weeks? Well, that shift, that happened real quick. And then some of the things that we had to do were really more operationally. So we used to do sales stand-ups once a week. We now do them every morning at 8:30. And it kind of gives everybody a chance to say hello to one another and get started. About 2-3 weeks into the pandemic, we recognized that we had 3 sort of occurrences going on. One we would call the witness protection program, which is the person who would show up with the bright lights behind them so you could only see the silhouette of their body and not see their face. We had the version of I'm going to join the call, but I'm going to shut my camera off so you really can't see me. And then we had the folks who were coming to the meeting looking a little nicked up. Maybe they had just kind of rolled out. The meeting's at 8:30 a.m. It's, you got to get out of bed. And we realized we had to help people with habits. We had to help people with their health and their well-being because we weren't with them every day. So we started a program of wellness. We have a Peloton channel. We have a golf channel. We got Slack channels on wellness and everything like that. And we realized that the distancing part of social distancing really required us to lean in as an organization and be much more personal and caring, because we weren't seeing folks. We weren't with them. And by doing that, people were very appreciative. And we always had the business engineered for this. So we didn't need to start up any new data or any new dashboards. We've refined some of them, but everybody always knew how many calls they're making, what it turned into discos, what it turned into demos, how they close in business. So we were well engineered from that perspective. It was more of a human thing for us, to the point now where I got a little shout out from some folks recently, but I've now begun having sales manager meetings in my backyard, because it's a safe space, and I put the chairs 6 or 8 feet apart, and we sit in the shade, but we get to physically see each other. And that's not easy to do in the city. So for us, it was the tech was there, the understanding was there, but we've got an organization, like a lot of sales organizations, where people really dig each other, and they want to be together, and they want to get people fired up, and they want to go out to lunch, and they want to go do all that other stuff, and they can't do that. So we're trying to find the next best thing. And by the way, the Zoom cocktail hours, those didn't last either. So we're constantly pivoting, trying. I hope that answers your question.
It's wonderful. And you kind of touched on something too. There's a lot of trying, and there's trying things that really, really work. And then there's trying things that don't work. And Kate, as you're thinking about how you transitioned and your company transitioned to working from home, what kinds of things did you try that really, really worked that maybe you'll continue even as things normalize? And what kinds of things did you try that really didn't work?
Yeah, I think John just mentioned one of them on the didn't work thing, that the Zoom cocktail hours got tired very, very quickly. But, just like what John said, I think we're constantly having to innovate, and Trish mentioned it in their pre-call. pivot, and you pivot so many times. It's like, how many times until you get to a full circle here? But and you can make a complete 360. But I think one of the things that has been really successful for us is we've got 2 rituals, and these were rituals that we had when we were together in a physical space and not. And so those rituals are Monday metrics. We gather the entire company together every Monday to go over the metrics across all the departments of the business, and so that everybody has a complete understanding of where we are performing to our goals. And then we end the week together with Friday show and tell. And those are so important to us. And show and tell is when every discipline within the business gets to get up and present something that they worked on, that they're proud on, and then present the results as it relates to that thing. And so bring the whole company together for those 2 things. We start the week together, we end the week together. And it's been incredibly important for Drift. I'd say the other thing too on more, so those are macro level company wide things. On the micro level thing, I think I've spent far more time than probably ever before in one-on-ones just talking about the person. So I kind of always encourage my employees I want everybody to bring their whole selves to work, but I spend a lot more time checking in on the personal. I think because like just what John had said, right? It's super easy to get lost in what day it is, what time it is. You're rolling out of bed, you're clicking the Zoom link and you're getting going, right? And so just making sure, just checking in, understanding how people are doing, talking about how things are affecting them more than ever before.
Hey, Kate, quick question for you. Are you finding that some of those rituals, those meetings that you're having are actually a little bit better sometimes on Zoom?
100%. So the game has definitely, so show and tell is actually a competitive environment. So the company gets to vote on the presentation that that they like most, or that best fits the criterion of showed results, showed the work, etc. And yes, like the game has gone up. And in fact, I'll tell you this. So it used to be you stood behind a podium in whatever respective office you were, and we'd zoom in all the offices. But now it's, I'll tell you, I presented on Friday. I was the most popular presentation, just not to brag or anything, but I went all out. I did a Drift version of Some Good News and like recorded a video for my presentation. Yes, the bar has been raised. People are getting more creative and trying to find, I think, more creative outlets. I even got my kids involved in it. My daughter made the sign. It was great, right? And so
dogs. Everybody's got the dogs too.
Yeah.
Just bring the new puppies in.
Yeah.
No, it's similar for us. We have a Thursday, every Thursday night, all company used to have dinner sometimes. But the attendance and the engagement is great. I mean, the questions and just the content that we're sharing, people are present, I think, more than when we were all sort of huddled upstairs and 100 of us standing around. Those were still good, but it's amazing that this pivot has actually improved communication in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that the pivot also includes not only caring about the business and how we pivot the business, but also how we pivot caring about our people and making sure that they feel good and that they feel safe. And I'm hearing a lot of themes around just caring and loving the people that we work with. And that's really important during a tough time too. And so Trish, for you, what has it looked like for you when you think about what's worked and what hasn't worked over the last couple of months?
Well, we've been a virtual business since day one. So this was kind of our normal operating procedure. Although I will tell you, it does feel just a tad bit more claustrophobic than it ever did before. But I think as a team, we have taken this slowdown, because things have slowed down a little bit for us, as a way to learn. So I spend a lot of time talking to other leaders and picking their brains about what they're seeing, which is, I never had the bandwidth to do that before. So I know I was teasing barrels before, and I always will, but I've probably talked to John more in the last couple months than I have in the last year, because picking his brain, what are you seeing? What pivots are you making? you know, whatever the case may be. So I talked to John, I talked to Keenan, I talked to Lori Richardson. I'm like, I talked to my clients. I am learning so much from my clients. It's insane. So I think that's one of the things we've seen is that without that go, 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 go mentality, you can take a moment and say, I'm going to take advantage of this and I'm going to learn as much as I can in a very compressed time frame. So I think myself and my team, we've very much done that, and we're sharing amazing information. The ideas they're coming back with, I never would have thought of on my own. So I'm really appreciative on the one hand, not appreciative of the down revenues, I might say, but on the one hand, I'm appreciative of the learning experience.
Yeah, I love that. And you talked a little bit too about urgency. And Boston's a big city. It has to feel like everything has just been on complete hold. And it's hard for that to not become ingrained. And we've seen a lot of salespeople, a lot of companies fight the urge to be taking their foot off the gas or have questions around how do I create urgency with my prospects? Nobody wants to buy. Everyone is scared. And so, Kate, as you're thinking about these problems, how do you show up and help that front line feel confident selling and creating urgency right now?
Yeah, I think early days, a lot of our team had questions on this. Is like, how am I supposed to call these people in the middle of all of this chaos, and why does this even matter? And so we really thought about it as, listen, there's two things here. One is because of the nature of the product that we sell, we're selling Tylenol at a time when the world has a headache, right? People now, their websites are more important than ever. They have to get all of the non-digital channels don't exist anymore. Field marketing's gone, trade shows, events are gone. All of these things are gone. So now we've got to go reinvest in digital, and we can help them do that. But then the second thing was, more importantly, it was, but how are you? We need to do this because this is how we will protect one another. So look around, even in this Brady Bunch picture, if you want on Zoom, look at the faces of these folks. And we need to keep selling and keep working and keep growing this business, because that is how we will protect one another and ensure that we come out of the other side of this situation a better, stronger, bigger company. And so that was really the narrative that we used internally of like, I understand it's difficult. We will help you craft your messaging and make sure that it doesn't sound tone deaf or insensitive, but we have to do this, and we have to do this together because it's super important. That's how I'm going to protect Trish and John and Trish and John's family and all people around them. Right. And so that was how we communicated to the team. And when we did that, it made a lot of sense. I know that message really resonated.
So Kate, I love one thing you said specifically. Well, I love everything you say, but one thing specifically stuck out was you said we're Tylenol in a time when everyone needs an aspirin. You know, and that's one thing we spend a lot of time talking to our clients about is about, are you viewed as a vitamin or as an aspirin? Because everybody knows they should take vitamins, right? You remember that conversation?
Oh yeah.
So that's part of the pivot. Like pivoting just doesn't mean just strategy, just message, just process. Sometimes pivot means solution. Mm-hmm. Like what value can you now bring to the solution you're offering that makes you more Tylenol-like, for lack of a better term? So that's part of the thought process that a lot of our clients have gone through.
Yeah,
Yes.
Absolutely, Trish. I think you definitely get stuck when you think about only one of those things. If you're only going to change your messaging, you're only going to change, and that's what, when going back to the earlier conversation, like you need to make sure that like you are solving new problems for people you didn't solve 100 days ago. I know you are, right? Like, because people are doing that with most solutions today. How are you communicating your ability to do that, right? You are solving problems for new personas you've never solved for today. How are you making sure, how are you equipping the team to tell those stories and to make sure that messaging resonates?
Yeah. John, anything you want to add to that?
I thoroughly loved listening to both of you. I think you hit it right. You hit it right on the head. For Crayon, a couple things that we realized is, And I think the over and under on the word pivot is now at about 15, and I think we're going to get to 30. But a subtle turn we made was businesses are wanting to break out. Like, they don't want to be the business that's still sitting around with the "in these difficult times" rap. They want to break out, and they see a breakout strategy. And we have turned our messaging to, if you're going to break out, you better know what your competitors are doing, every level of detail. So our breakout strategy conversation is really resonating. And that wasn't something we were talking about before. Except who was breaking out? We were all just chugging along, doing just fine. So that was an important message. Another one for us too was we needed to know what was working. So we paid attention to something we call leading indicators. And everything from who's messaging what, and is it converting to more discovery calls and more demos, and maybe it's not business, but are we filling up pipelines with certain types of positioning and messaging? And that would tell us the business is going to come. Maybe it got to the CFO's desk or got to the CEO's desk and they were like, we're not spending any money this month or next month. But there was clearly a need. So we never let off on the gas attributed to what we knew was working, because we knew a lot of people were just saying, I love your idea, I'll do business with you, I can't spend money right now. Cash is king. By the way, that's the way we're behaving. But it's understanding those leading indicators. So when the switch flips, boom, off you go.
You can either plant in the spring or beg in the fall. I say that every day. Plant in the spring.
I love that.
I love it. What a good.
I didn't make that up. I think it's Jim Rohn. It's a quote from Jim Rohn. So yeah, but I love it.
So today it's yours.
Yeah, we'll plant in the spring. Let's plant in the spring.
Shifting gears a little bit to the types of things that people are looking for guidance on how to scale. A lot of people assume that the number one reason that people want to stay at companies is because of compensation. They love their job because of comp, but leadership knows that it's actually the top two are culture and leadership. That's why people stay in a job even when times get tough. When you think about the idea of culture, how do you scale culture, especially in a virtual world? And for newer companies, you have to implement culture in a world like this or continue the culture that you have built. So Trish, when you're thinking about the ideas of culture, how do you scale culture in a virtual world like this?
So it's interesting because I think culture can be a really tricky term. So I think in the heyday when, VCs were throwing money around and people were growing like crazy, culture meant like beer on Fridays, unlimited time off, which was always a lie, by the way. It's crazy things, like inconsequential things. So I think culture has shifted nowadays to become something more meaningful. And I think culture now means just what, Kate and John have said. I care about you as a person. Like, that's culture. Like supporting your management team and giving them the bandwidth and the tools and the training and the coaching so they know how to have on those one-on-ones that show empathy and care about people. So I think culture has changed from being what crap is in my office that you might enjoy drinking, eating, or whatever, to I care about you.
Yeah. And people see, people are smart. They see through, is it genuine or is it made up? I fell in love with developing people and watching them grow and, keeping the list of how many millionaires I had a tiny little piece of their career and growth. And I give that speech everywhere I go. Like, you're going to be a millionaire. You're going to be a millionaire. And I'm going to have a tiny piece of that, because you're going to be something special. And I'm going to have a small piece of you launching your career. In my former company, we used to say, no one's going to retire here, but we want you to look back on your experience here as one where you grew as an individual and grew as a professional. And we meant it. And at Crayon, we just finished a document outlining what our core values are. It was an exhaustive process because we cared so much about it, and literally like every word we cared about. And in the final document, is genuine because it's us. And, you know, we now talk to people about it. We reward that. There I go, pivoted. We've changed our whole sort of company meeting where we reward everybody to, you know, who are the people who demonstrate the core values of Crayon on a regular basis and are nominated by the employees. And it's a non-management group that picks who the winners are. So we've just like leaned in really hard on the caring, but the important thing is we mean it. Because if we didn't, people would see through it and it'd be gone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Kate, kind of digging into some of the themes that you've talked about too. A lot of people think of culture as we have a ping pong table, we have snacks, but that's the body that it's in, that's not the soul. And so when you think about scaling culture and how we do that, what does it look like for you?
Yeah, I think, you know, Trish really nailed this one a ton. And John was talking about it earlier too, but the ping pong table doesn't do it anymore. And I think, I actually think like that is a big transformation that's happened over the last 100 days. Cause I do think there was still some of that, like, yeah, but their office isn't cool. Like it's not a cool layout, or they have cubes, or they don't get free lunch there. And now it's like, yeah, lunch is upstairs in your kitchen. You can have it whatever time you like. And so, and I think really what's happened is people are really paying much more attention to does this company genuinely, a lot of what John talked about, do they genuinely care about me as a person? How am I going to grow my career here, even if I'm stuck in my house for the next 6 months? How am I going to grow my skill set and become a better sales development representative, salesperson, marketer, etc. Even though this is where I'm at, right? How am I getting coached, and how are they investing in me? And so I think that is super, super important. And I think one of the things that our leadership team has done at Drift was be extraordinarily transparent. Because I think in times of uncertainty, one of the biggest things that happens is obviously people start to get fear in them. And so our executive leadership team put everything on the table, told everybody exactly how it is. This is what's going on. It's our 2 top priorities are protecting you and your families and protecting Drift the business. That is what we're going to do. Every decision we make from here on out is going to be in service of those 2 things. And so that was super, super, super helpful. And I know it resonated a ton with our employees. Our CFO, Jim Kelleher, who's at LogMeIn for a long time and a bunch of other places, but everybody, I mean, I don't know of another CFO that I've heard who's just like knocking it out of the park. I'm pretty sure that if they could, the employees would like go lift Jim up and carry them out on his shoulders and give him a parade around town. I mean, that's the level of transparency and trust that they have in the organization today. And I think that is the new culture, I think that Trish has been talking about.
Spot on, Kate. And I'd throw Tom Huntington, our CFO, in that mix as well. I mean, every level of detail. So a part of the beauty of being in a private company is every level of detail you can share anytime you want. And you know, how much cash do we have? What's our burn? When are we going to step on the gas? When we can invest? What are we going to invest in? I give a Salesforce to the company nearly every week. I never used to do that. I would give a Salesforce the forecast to the CEO and CFO, and I'd be done with it. No, people want to know how we're doing. Like, you know, what's the pipeline look like? And absolutely, it's comforting to people to feel like they know what the heck is going on, whether it's good news, bad news, or in between.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have a couple more minutes left, and we have some good questions popping up in Q&A. So the final one that I have for you before I pass it back over to Jeff to talk through some of the Q&A from our attendees. John, staying with you for a little bit, when you think about your talent acquisition process, so thinking about scaling and growing, acquiring incredible talent is a huge part of that. And one of the few benefits that we have of COVID is that there's amazing talent on the market that wouldn't normally be there.
There is.
And so when you think about talent acquisition, what was your typical process and how has that potentially changed going forward?
So it's a great question. And there is, unfortunately, a treasure trove of outstanding people out there in the marketplace right now, unemployed. And boy, oh boy, would I love to be able to open up the floodgates and hire some of them, or underemployed. Probably the biggest shift for us is, how do you onboard and train and get someone new to your organization into the culture and into the flow that we've talked so much about. I hired a wonderful BDR manager literally at the beginning of the coronavirus. Like, we went in, greeted her in the office, you know, gloves on, handed her computer, and like stepped away because she had cooties maybe. And she has managed the BDR team that we have, expanded that BDR team, and she's never met anybody. The only time she ever met anybody was either during the interview process, because we were still safe, or in my backyard. But what we've done is we've realized all the things that we've been talking about relative to staying in touch and leveraging meetings and being transparent. We're pouring all that into, but also very, very disciplined in our enablement process, very disciplined in our onboarding program, like schedules and teamwork. And, you know, because you can't say, oh, wander around the office for a couple hours and get to know people. That's not going to happen. So being very, very disciplined and structured in the onboarding. And also, because there's such phenomenal talent out there, we've been able to hire some people. And we recently hired 3 wonderful BDRs that literally just started Monday. They're smart and they're talented and they're picking things up very, very quickly. So that's making it a little bit easier as well, but it's the discipline and it's the approach and the consistently trying new things. And then the last thing I said to the BDRs we hired, I spoke with them all last night. I said, you need to teach us in this process as well. I've never onboarded this way. I've never done this. You have, and you need to be telling us what's working and what's not working, because we've got a ready ear to make the adjustment.
Yeah. I think one opportunity that many companies miss is not doing an exit interview after the onboarding process, right? It's when you get such great information, and we only do it when people are leaving our organizations. What about if you did an exit interview, for lack of a better term, at different, segments in their journey with your business? I think we'd learn a lot. And I don't think we all take advantage of that.
Yeah.
Love it.
Kate, any additional thoughts on that piece?
I love it. We do an exit interview at onboarding. The other thing we do is we look at people when they're at different, when we see trends on potentially when people get to our average tenure, and we start to do interviews there, talk to folks proactively, understand how they're feeling, what they're thinking, like what those things are, and then put that feedback back into the business too. So identifying key measures, just as Trish said, key measures along the employee journey, right? And making sure that we're always in close contact and that we're not reacting, we're being proactive about it to improve.
I am so liberating that idea from you.
Oh,
At the average tenure date.
Got that one right down. Average
Yep,
tenure interviews.
Got it.
Stole that one, Kate. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I love it. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation amongst us. John, you were mentioning the idea of hiring new people like BDRs and how to onboard them and train them. And, I should write you a check, because that's exactly what Sales Assembly does. So I'm going to send you a check in the mail for that mention, for setting us up nicely for that. But I'm going to pass it back over to Jeff. We have some great questions in the chat from the audience, and let's pop into our Q&A portion. Here he is. Jeff, awesome. We can't hear you.
You're on mute there, Jeff.
Your talking head, no voice. There you go.
You think after 8,000 Zoom meetings in the last
Not possible.
How did this thing work? No, that was fantastic discussion. We had a bunch of questions submitted in. Just hearing about like everyone being lifted up on their shoulders. I mean, it's been months since people have carried me around on their shoulders. So I'm just okay. So let's dive into a couple of questions here. First one was for you, John, from something that you had mentioned a little bit earlier, when you were talking about like people, emailing and leading with, "Hey, hope you're doing well in these difficult times," etc. I get a lot of those emails too. It just, at this point, it just screams, "Hey, I'm a cold sales email. Go ahead and delete me," right? I'm curious, what are you telling your reps, or what have you seen from others that have emailed you that maybe, they're approaching it in a better way, where it's not just rinse and repeat, same sales BS line that, yeah, we get it. Of course you hope that we're doing well, understandable, but that's no longer really an effective way to kind of get a conversation started. Have you seen anything different or more effective?
Yes. And it's back to really the basics of good outreach emailing. Years ago, we used to call it "show me you know me," but it's this whole idea of do your homework, understand the person you're reaching out to, understand their business, understand their problems, and speak to that. And people will be appreciative of that. Yeah, we did have to have some sensitivity. When this thing whole hit, we were not doing the "hope you're well" stuff, and people were a little upset that we were just kind of plowing ahead. We had to do that shift, but that didn't last long. That was like a 2 or 3 week, and then it was like, that's gone. But I think now more than ever, if you can speak to the "how do you hang in there" story that some buyers are having, or the "how do you break out" story, people are extremely appreciative that you've got it right. And then we were chatting about this before it all started. Subject lines matter. Like, write your outreach email, know the person you're talking to, save that subject line till you're done with the email. And then that subject line has to rock their world in a way where they go, "Okay, this person knows me. I'll read. And then, yeah, maybe I'll take that call."
Awesome. So the subject line of John just following up ...
Oh, no.
Qualify?
No, the one that works is, "I want to bump this to the top of your inbox."
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we don't do that. We literally have a list of what we call weak words, probably 50 of them. Follow up, help, reaching out, all that stuff. Gonzo.
Love it. That's great, man. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So we had another question. Just I don't know if this was directed at anyone in particular, so I'll just throw it out to the group. Thinking about like a distributed work environment, and the fact that I think a lot of companies moving forward, if they haven't begun doing so already, are going to be very much more open to hiring, BDRs, AEs, etc. That don't necessarily fit into a specific geo. Even if the company is headquartered in Boston, they might be open to hiring AEs in, Nebraska or, Salt Lake City or something like that. So the question was, do you foresee like a realignment in the variance of how employees that are doing a similar job with similar education would be compensated based on the geography in which they live? Being that this is going to become probably a much more common thing than previously. Curious if there's any thoughts on that.
Let me make sure we understand the question. So are you saying 2 people doing the same job, one in Boston, one in Podunk? Should I pay Podunk less?
Right.
I don't think it's legal, but just because the cost of living is less. I'm pretty sure, but I could be wrong, that if 2 people are doing the same job with the same quotas, they have to earn the same amount. Could be wrong, but pretty sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Sorry,
I agree with Trish on that one. Sorry. I agree wholeheartedly with Trish on that one. And even if it isn't illegal, you're going to run into a bunch of issues, because if I know anything about especially our younger employees today, everything's out there. They talk about it all. nothing's private. And so like, if you move into a model in that way, you're going to have, whether it's illegal or not, whether you have legal issues, you go to court or not, you're going to have a lot of issues. Your employees will take you to court within your business. I'll tell you that much.
Agreed.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily legal from a traditional legal standpoint. Just, thinking of the example of when, we hear stories about how some companies in San Francisco are paying entry-level BDRs like 90 grand base salary, right? And that's not necessarily the case in every market. But I think if nothing else, what you said, Kate, just a moment ago about, you'll be prosecuted to the fullest extent of your internal culture, that's probably something to really consider and be careful of as well. Cool. One more question, Kate, kind of going off of the example that you used about how you guys are selling Tylenol in the situation where everybody has a headache. A question came in. Has this provided you an opportunity to be testing any sort of like new go-to-market strategies that you might not have really tried under normal circumstances? And if so, is there something that maybe during a strategy meeting people thought that was crazy and off the wall, but it actually proved to be somewhat successful?
I am encouraging, begging, getting on my hands and knees, driving by their homes and honking with a sign that says exactly that to my entire team right now, which is like, there are no crazy ideas. I need all of your ideas, because everything we never thought would work is happening. So I'll tell you right now, Drift has our hypergrowth conference, huge conference. We did it last year. We had plans to do it in Boston, London, actually in Austin, and in London this year. We did it in Boston, San Francisco in years past. Huge in-person conference. We do webinars. I don't think we ever would have said like, hey, you know what we should do? A virtual event of a giant magnitude, and we should get almost 9,000 people to sign up and register for it, because our in-person was working great and people loved it, and it was a real split between like the practical and the inspirational. And but I think what we've seen is people that we were able to pull off in a giant virtual event that still had our brand ethos within it in terms of being both practical and inspirational, as well as had a DJ. Wasn't just we think about them as virtual experiences, and it was the biggest event that we've ever had as a company, right? And I think we're doing these and more of these, where we have discussions like these, where we grab 25 to 30 marketing sales leaders together to have a discussion in a panel. And I'll tell you, like, I could probably do them 3 times a week if I had the team to go support that, right? Like, people are dying for it because they want to have discussions like these. I think one of the things you heard Trish and John mention earlier was like, people are hungry for information. Trish said she's learning from her team more and more now than ever before, and learning from her clients, right? I think that's what's happening. People are hungry for hearing what their peers are doing. And so like getting together in scenarios like this is pretty good. So like, I don't know that that's something I ever would have done if everything was open and it was free, if I was free to pull people together in an in-person experience either. And I think it's more and more stuff like that. And I think you'll see us go innovate a ton.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it. Thank you so much to John, Trish, and Kate for the really thoughtful discussion. A bunch of really great ideas that were shared in just a really short half an hour here this morning. We have gone ahead and recorded the discussion so we could distribute it out to anybody that might want to share this with others on their team. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And with that, we're going to say goodbye to our expert panel and kick it over to the aforementioned John Barrows, who's going to take us the rest of the way.
Let's go.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Awesome discussion.
Here's John.
Hey, what's up?
Being that we're doing this event for the Boston folks, I don't think John needs much of an introduction, but I'm going to let him give a little bit of his own background and just, letting everyone know that based on the kind of the pre-call discussion that John and I had a couple of weeks ago, definitely some really great insights that he's going to be able to share. And then just like the panel, we'll wrap up with some Q&A after John is finished.
Cool. Jeff,
John,
can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
All right, could you do me a favor and give me over the control so I can share?
Yep.
All right. There we go. Cool. Thank you very much, Jeff. And yeah, thanks for joining. That was I was listening in, hearing Trish give me shit about talking too much, blah, blah, blah. So good news is I have my own audience right now and nobody gets to interrupt me. So let me do this. No, but Trish was right. Trish was right, actually, as we were talking about the Zoom situation and how I've actually had more conversations now than I have with people in a long time, and including Trish, right? I actually called her. We did a webinar recently on the future of SDRs because I was actually nervous about what I was seeing in the SDR world, and we're going to tap into a little bit of that today. But I reached out to her. I was like, Trish, I gotta talk to you because I'm getting a little worried about what I'm seeing right now. And, we work with SDRs and BDRs and AEs, but Trish legitimately wrote the book on SDRs. And so we had a really good podcast discussion and then which led to a webinar. So I think there's a silver lining to all of this stuff that we're in right now. And it was touched on in that panel discussion as far as reinventing or pivoting, right, as John said. So I'm going to try to kind of summarize a lot of the stuff that they talked about and talk about some actionable things here for everybody. So, this is all about stopping the guesswork. I've been doing a lot of thinking about what's happening right now and how we tend to guess a lot in sales. And I think there's some things that we need to be doing right now to take the guesswork, because so many people are reaching out to me and saying, hey, John, what works and, how to strike that right tone and all that other stuff. So we're going to be diving into that. But for those of you who don't know me, as Jeff said, look, I do sales training. I'm actually a sales rep who happens to train. I run my own little company here. It's JB Sales. We got about 7 employees. I actively prospect though into 25 accounts on a quarterly basis. I manage 10 to 20 deals in my pipeline at a given point in time, and I also cross-sell, upsell into existing accounts. While doing trainings, while running a company. So, and trying to pay attention and try to stay at least a half a step ahead of what's going on right now. Because I believe if you're not doing it right now, then you can't show people how to do it. Because things are just changing so rapidly at this point. So with that, and actually just a kudos here to Sales Assembly. This is probably out of all the groups out there that we work with, Sales Assembly is the highest value group that we work with. As far as the quality of companies and people involved and everything else. I mean, a lot of our customers actually are part of Sales Assembly, including Sprout and G2 and Upwork and LinkedIn. And so needless to say, you're in good company if you decide to join into Sales Assembly now that they're going nationwide. So with that, let's dive right in. Look, I also want to make this just before we dive too much in. I want to make this as valuable and as relevant for everybody here as possible. So do me a favor, if you got questions, throw them in the chat. The more questions, the merrier here. Or whatever you want to talk about. I mean, I'll talk about anything. We talk about all aspects of sales. I do training on prospecting all the way through to negotiations and closing. And I'm going to share with you some of the stuff that we're doing right now with our customers to get in, to figure out what the hell's going on right now. So with that, what's changed everything every day. I don't know. I've been through 3 weird economies, right? And started 2 companies in the 2 worst economies out there. The first one was 2000. When I was first out of school, a buddy of mine, Chris, who actually now works with me as my CRO, he started an IT services firm in 2000, which the economy was not that bad, not that great. But there was opportunity there, right? Then 2007 is my second company, right? That's when I started the sales training, or at least took over from a company that went belly up. And again, horrible economy, but it was my best year ever. This is something I've never seen before, and I don't think too many people have. That's why it drives me crazy when I see people on LinkedIn being like, this is what you should do during this pandemic, and this is how you should act. It's like, I don't know, excuse me? Like, were you around during the Black Plague? I don't know. I wasn't. So anybody who pretends like they know what they're talking about right now is completely full of shit. And so, because things are literally changing. I mean, they talked about it on the panel where what happened, what worked last week is not working anymore, right? Lead with empathy and, oh, I hope you and your family are doing well and all that other stuff. And now, it's been overused or whatever it is. And the sentiment is changing, not just in general, but by region. Right. So if you're calling into New York versus California versus Texas versus the UK, I mean, depending on where you're going right now, you got to take all of that into consideration because your ideal, I mean, Trish said this, right? I think it's time to take a breath right now. I agree with her wholeheartedly as far as taking a breath and reassessing. I go back to the silver lining here. Morgan, who's on my team, I hired him a couple of years ago. He's a 27-year-old kid, right? And we were having this conversation and he said, you know what, John, my generation has grown up in a point and click world, right? Where anything we need is a click away, in the sense that you want to catch up on a series, you don't have to wait until next week. And if you miss it, you're in trouble, right? You just binge watch it on Netflix over the weekend and you're all done. You want your favorite meal? You got Uber Eats. You just, pops over and your favorite restaurant brings your best food, right? If you want to hit your numbers, you have a cadence tool now that you can push play on, then a billion emails go out and you get a few hits. So he's like, we've grown up in this world and we've stopped really caring, or we don't really care necessarily about the person that's on the other end of that phone number, on the other end of that email. And I think this is an opportunity with where we are right now to kind of recenter and realize what's important. I mean, I'm going to go back to what Trish said is, I've had more conversations now with people I actually care about than I have in a long time. People I've reached out to proactively and said, you know what, I actually want to talk to you. And I don't have the excuse now of I'm too busy and I can't see you. It's, hey, we're doing this. And so, there's friendships that are important. There's family who's important. There's business in what we think from our approach is important. And I think that's what is the silver lining here. And that's why I do think that, your ideal, all of it, everybody's ideal customers change. And right now is an opportunity to reset that, right? An easy way, I'll get to it a little bit later, but an easy way to do that is going back to science. I mean, Kate said this, right? The secret, I wrote some of these notes down. The secret is in your data, and stay close to it. And right now, I think we all got to be scientists. I think I talk a lot about sales being an art or a science. I fundamentally believe that sales should be way more scientific than artistic, especially right now. I mean, split testing is something, when somebody asks me, John, what do you, if you could go back and tell your 22-year-old self, what would you do? I would split test everything I did, A/B split test, right? So if you're going after CIOs in healthcare, come up with 2 different approaches to CIOs in healthcare, make 20 phone calls with this approach, make 20 phone calls with that approach, see which one yields a higher response rate. Right? If dealing with objections, I'm sure you and your teams right now are dealing with crazy amount of objections that sound really harsh up front, right? We're on COVID lockdown, budget freeze, those type of things. Oh, call me in 6 months. Well, like literally Google, I always say with objection handling, it's not about rocket science, it's science, right? Just Google best objection handling techniques, right? And come up with 2 or 3 approaches. And then based on that objection, write down the objection you're getting hammered on. Come up with 2 different approaches to that objection. And then the next 10 times it comes up, deal with it this way. The next 10 times deal with it that way. See which one yields a higher response rate. Ideal customer profile. People are kind of figuring out, okay, you see the red, yellow, green. I mean, there's companies are in 3 buckets, and this is shifting all over the place and daily as well. Red is still in lockdown mode because they're probably just getting smoked, right? They're in an industry right now like travel or whatever that has just gotten obliterated, right? And they are in legitimate lockdown. So you say, all right, I'm going to leave you guys alone. Good luck. The yellow is, I think, where a lot of companies are right now, which is kind of, they've settled into this new norm, whatever the hell that means. And they're looking at it saying, okay, we need to evolve. We need to adjust here. We might not be making long-term decisions, but we might have time to evaluate stuff. And we're putting more scrutiny on all the decisions that we have right now, but we're still making them, right? And then there's the green bucket. And the green bucket is there's two sections of the green bucket. One is the ones who are legit on fire. Like they are just all of a sudden went from, I think what Kate was saying or Trish was saying from a nice to have to a must have. So they went to an aspirin as opposed to vitamins. And like Zoom, I got to imagine if you're the VP of sales over at Zoom right now, like making it rain right now. And and I'm not even going to bother them. It's like, hey, good luck. Go try to make as much money as you possibly can. I mean, there's other industries that we're playing around with, for instance, that all of a sudden popped like security, right? Anything that has to do with security right now, endpoint security, screaming hot right now. What's another weird one for us that I didn't realize was surveys. So employee engagement. Like Qualtrics and SurveyMonkey, these are clients of ours. All of a sudden, they're super popular, right? They used to be kind of like employee engagement. Oh, that's nice, but hey, in an up economy, everything's going well, and so yeah, I'm going to survey my employees and serve my employees, whatever. But now, if I'm an executive at an organization, I got 500 people sitting out in their houses. I want to know what they are thinking about on a daily basis, right? So, sending out surveys, so they became hot. So I think we need to relook at that. So every company that comes in right now, this is where sales, marketing, and customer success need to align, and SDRs and AEs and BDRs, you name it. Every deal that happens right now in your business, to me, I would suggest an all hands meeting to have everybody come in and say, do a Zoom session and have that AE sit down and map out that entire sale. What was the use case? What was the approach? Who made the decision? What was the decision process? What did it look like? What aspects of our solution did they appreciate and which ones did they not? Who did we beat out for competition? And extract as much of that data as you possibly can to then re-profile people that fit that new profile, and then go tell that story to everybody else. Because, again, I'm gonna steal a lot of what Kate said. You're solving new problems for new personas, and how are you equipping your team to go out there and tell that story? And it's easy, actually. And this goes to engagement and a bunch of other stuff. Get that AE on there, get that client on there, and have them justify why they just made the investment in your organizations, and tell that story so that all those reps can listen to that and then go out and reach out to people that fit that profile and have those conversations. Hey, the reason for my call is we just brought on XYZ company who said their main priorities these days are X, Y, and Z, and you fit a very similar profile. I'd like to have a conversation with you about that. Like, that's a genuine conversation you can have, right? It's the same thing with personas. Look, your persona might not have changed. You might have the same potential buyer. I would reassess that, but I guarantee you their priorities have changed. Guarantee their priorities have changed. Like, I'll give you an example. Come February, this is on me. This is my CEO hat on. In December, I sat down with my team and I was like, all right, what's 2020 look like for us? We put what's the mark, right? 4 million. That was the mark that we were going for. And it was a 70-30 split, 70% on site, 30% remote. And then everybody had their marching orders according to that, right? And then all of a sudden March hit, and I mean, just COVID punches us square in the gut. And 70% of my revenues got ripped away from me. I mean, ripped away from me, right? So I had to reset everything. So we went from 4 million to 2.5 overnight, right? But my main priority was not $2.5 million anymore. My main priority as a business owner and as the business leader here is to retain my employees, is to make sure that they could still pay their bills and support their families. So something that came up in the previous panel discussion was urgency, right? How do you create urgency? Or, I'm guessing a lot of you have people ghosted you at this point, right? Well, the reason is most likely is if you qualified me back in January or February based on what my goals were, and you're still selling to that, I'm ghosting the shit out of you right now. Like, I don't care, because that stuff is that's not a priority for me anymore. I mean, we do this report every single year, right? Where I spend about $3,000 on these kids who are way smarter than me to go do a research project. And it's the top priorities of the top executives in the top industries, right? So these kids like work for Bain Capital and all sorts of crazy stuff. And they're way smarter than I'll ever be. And we get this document that is just bananas value. And every time I do the training and I drop it, people are like, oh, can I get a copy of that, right? And it's tabbed out as far as every single, retail, manufacturing, oil and gas, SaaS, tech, hardware, whatever. CEO priority 1, 2, 3, CFO priority 1, 2, 3, CIO. And it is crazy. Like we craft our messaging around that. We, come up with questions based on those priorities so that we can have at least a little bit of context to our conversations, not say stuff like, tell me about your priorities, right? And it's fantastic. Well, it was fantastic. Now it's a $3,000 virtual paperweight because none of those priorities are valid anymore. So we have to reset what those priorities are. So again, how do we find this out? Let's stop guessing. I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit here, but you have customers right now that presumably get value out of what you do. All right. And so if you go out of business, they're going to lose the value of what they get out of your solution. Why not bring them into the fold? If I was an executive at any one of any company, big company out there, I would be having weekly scrums, weekly meetings where I would pick a persona. For instance, our personas are VPs of sales, CROs, and VPs of enablement, right? I would grab one of those personas and do a Zoom session with my team. And as the leader, I would sit there and I would ask them, hey, how have your decision processes changed? Who are what are the new priorities that you have right now? Who else is involved? What messaging would resonate right now if we reached out to you? What value do you get out of our solution? And what are the parts you don't care about? So that we can reset what those are. And do some research too. Have reps literally Google VPs of enablement, priorities, challenges, COVID-19, 2020. And do some research and increase their business acumen so that we're not just regurgitating pitches or anything like that, right? Decision-making processes have changed. Everything has changed. Urgency has changed, right? Because again, I'll look at from a business owner standpoint, I can't look out more than about 6 months at this point. I mean, PPP is coming to the end. There's some inflection points coming up here for executives. PPP is coming to an end as of this month, right? So there's an inflection point right there. Now executives need to look at it and say, okay, can I afford to keep the rest of the employees here, right? And then after that, it's like, all right, now I can kind of look at the end of this year. I can kind of make some assumptions, safe assumptions about how the pipeline looks between now and the end of the year. But next year, I barely remember, I can barely predict what's going to happen in an hour, forget about next year. So that's why we have to reset our value proposition. We have to re-understand where our product fits. And as a leadership standpoint, you got to start doing some assessments of where your product does fit and what adjustments you need to make. Because if you're still selling in the old world based on the old value proposition that your solution had, and you're doubling down on that right now, I guarantee your reps are struggling. I guarantee it. You need to lead from the front and say, okay, we've actually restructured our offering and this, and this is how it goes now. And this is the new priorities. So therefore, team, go out and sell that. Right. So all that stuff has changed. And so what do we do about it? Right. I mean, I think there's a couple of things, right? Because we're left guessing. And I've always been somewhat frustrated with the fact that we guess too much in sales anyways. But I'd rather guess than pitch. And I say that because when I was first in sales, it wasn't about the client at all, right? It was about me. I had an elevator pitch that I would say. I came up with it and I perfected it, and I would say it over and over and over and over again. And it was, I mean, people have heard it before. I used to make $400 a week to get 8 meetings a month, to get 4 proposals, to get 2 pieces of closed business with an average deal size of $3,500. And I thought it was a volume game. Same thing with presentations. I thought it was about how great my solution was, right? And that's why, during a 1 hour, I used to fly, drive around Massachusetts here and do 1 hour meetings when I was selling outsourced IT services to that first company that I started. And, I was told, I was 24 years old, so I had no idea what I was doing. And I was told earlier in my career, hey, make sure make sure the client speaks more than you, right? 2 ears, 1 mouth, that whole thing, right? So I would legit ask 35 minutes worth of questions to make sure that the client talked more than me, right? And by the way, it did not matter what you said in those 35 minutes. If you had computers, as long as you had computers, you were getting my pitch. So I'd ask 35 minutes and I'd pretend that I was taking notes and real serious. And then about 35 minutes into it, I'd be like, thank you so much. Anyways, well, we were founded in June of 2000 with 3 founders, 1 finance, 1 strategy, and 1 technical guy, which really puts us in a unique position as an IT services firm, because most IT services firms are founded by engineers, and they take very engineering focus to your business, where we take a strategy, a finance, and an engineering focus to your business. And you get an account manager, and that's why this is important to you. And you get 3 levels of engineers, and so you never pay for what you don't need. And I would go on and on and on and on and on about all the wonderful things. And at the end, and this is where I learned this, at the end, and by the way, if you ever hear this word at the end of one of your demos or presentations, you know you've done a miserable job. I would get the word digest. You know what, John, that sounds really good. You know what, I need a little time to digest what you just told me right there. Why don't you circle back in a couple of weeks? We'll take it from there. Does that sound fair? If you ever hear that word, stop and apologize to the person that you just wasted their time, because it is our job to help them digest the information. If they walk out of the conversation more confused than we're walking in, we've done a terrible job. So that was all about us. That was all about me, right? Now, I evolved after learning training and just getting my teeth kicked in too often, that it's not about me, it's about them. So, all right, so specifically when prospecting, I got to find something about them, right? I mean, John said, show me you know me. There's the why you now email that I represent, Jeff Hoffman came up with. And it's all about doing research, right? So you go on somebody's website, you do some homework on them, and you find a trigger, right? Open up a new office, launch a new product, whatever that is. And then you make a connection to it. So you say, hey, I saw you open up a new office. The reason I wanted to reach out to you is because we effectively help companies who open new offices. This is how, which is cool, right? And it's way better than a templated email. Same thing with personas. Like, again, going back to that executive priority sheet that I was talking about earlier, that $3,000 paperweight, I used, going back to urgency, like you can't create urgency, but you can drive it and you can uncover it. And the way you do that is by aligning with somebody's priorities, right? Because what I don't see is, I don't see how your solution is going to help me achieve what I want to achieve. And that's our goal right there. So if I can understand what these really are, then I can make the connection there. And that's how I can uncover urgency and get you to move faster, right? But unfortunately, for the majority of my career, the way I would go about that would by saying stuff like, tell me about your priorities. And by taking a very general approach or making a general statement like that, I would usually get very general answers like, oh, revenue. Oh, okay, let me show you how to impact your revenue, right? But instead now, with that sheet that I was telling you earlier, now I would walk in and say, hey, you know what? We're typically dealing with VPs of sales in the SaaS industry. And they're telling us right now that throughout COVID-19, some of their top priorities are X, Y, and Z. Are those yours? And that's better, right? That's better than me, hey, we're the leading provider of. And then same thing with messaging. So we kind of guess based on those things, we guess on what messaging might connect. Those are all still guesses. The triggers, that's a hypothesis. Hey, that happened. I've seen that happen before. Let's talk, right? Persona, but that's us in the best scenario, us taking a guess about where our solution can land, okay? What I'm done is I'm done guessing. I want to know, all right? And who knows better than I do? Plenty of people, but my customers and my employees. So when I said earlier, science over art, all right. When I tell you, I like genuinely believe that we need to be scientists. I'll give you an example. Like, I've always tracked a lot of stuff. Okay. I've never been a dashboard guy for whatever reason. I'm more of an Excel guy. And you know what? At the end of the day, when the economy is going well, I got off track with tracking, because we were killing it. You know what I mean? So I was like, well, yeah, it's important to track all this stuff, but I got a million other things to do. I got all these meetings that I got to, go to and all that other stuff. So, shame on me. So I got back to it, and I'm going to show you here real quick what we just did recently that opened up my eyes to what was working and what wasn't, and becoming a scientist with data. So I had my team actually map out every single meeting that we've had since the beginning of the year, not last year. I don't care about last year. I care about what happened in the past, since March basically, but we did go back to January because we do have some APAC and some EMEA sessions that we're getting canceled too. And I had them write down who set the meeting, who attended the meeting, who was the company with, what was the source, where did it come from? And then looked at this data and come to find out of the 300 meetings that we had scheduled between the beginning of the year and now, we had 300 meetings, right? So inbound represented 20%, which is fantastic. That means our inbound engine is going good. I'm going to look into that messaging about why and where those are coming from. Are they ads? Are they whatever, right? But that's a good sign. Then outbound cold LinkedIn, and this was mostly video. So when we do LinkedIn videos, for those of you who don't know how to do it, it's pretty easy. all you have to do is have the app. You can't do it on your laptop. You can, when you message somebody, you got to be one connected to them, right? But when you message somebody, you can just do the video. And I know John said it's kind of getting a little cheesy, but that's if you're cheesy. But if you do it in a genuine way and you put it as part of a sequence or a cadence, that is where we're seeing by far the highest response rates, right? From a cold standpoint. And then existing connections. So people that we already knew, okay? So what is this telling me as a business leader? Oh, and by the way, look at cold calling. 1.1% of our meetings are coming from pure cold calling. You know, James Buckley on my team, this kid loves the phone. I mean, loves it in a almost an unhealthy way. He came to me a few weeks back and he said, John, you know, I've made like 1,000 phone calls and I've gotten, you know, almost nobody on the phone. And when they do get on the phone, they're pretty pissy, right? So we started digging into this. And I think Connect and Sell even has some data on this, which is bananas. It's on average, it takes like 830 dials or something like that to get like 10 connects. So phone was struggling before COVID, right? But now with everybody working from home, I'm actually doing a soft survey and I'm going out and asking every VP I know, VP of sales specifically, and saying, hey, are you getting your phone forwarded to your cell phone, your work phone forwarded to your cell phone? No. Okay. Do you check your voicemails? Yeah. How often? Maybe once a week, usually on Fridays. So VPs of sales, who you'd think would be the number one to actually have their phone, you know, I mean, just on the off chance that somebody might want to do some business, right? They're not having their phone. So, okay. So whereas we used to lead with phone on our cadences and do kind of calls and then emails and then social, now we're flipping it over and saying, okay, let's do social, warm them up a little bit, hit them with a few, you know, emails, and then use phone in a different way. Not to expect the connect, but to actually leverage it to drive them back to something that we did earlier, like a video. Hey, you know, I'm leaving you a call on Friday because I'm guessing that's when you're going to be checking your email, your voicemails here. I sent you an email on Tuesday, an in-mail with a video. If you could take a look at it, I'd appreciate it and get back to me one way or the other, right? So this data is reshaping what our approach is on a weekly basis. We're scrumming every, you know, you know, scrums, we do weekly scrums with the team where we're collecting data and we're analyzing where the meetings come from. What are the trends looking like? Like those are the type of things that we got to be doing right now. Right. And again, tapping into our existing customers, bring them in right now. They can tell you the value. Like I wrote a blog post a little while ago, and this goes back to the digest point that I was making earlier. I wrote a blog post called Sell to the 20%. All right. Which means that pick any product or service you own. I almost guarantee you only use 10 to 20% of the functionality, whatever that product or service is. So clothes, 10% maybe, right? Your car, right now it's 0, but you know, maybe you drive it in the office, leave it there, whatever. Your iPhone, I mean, that thing has more power than we used to send somebody to the moon, for crying out loud. But yet most people check their emails, Snapchat, whatever. And I guarantee all your products, anybody who's listening to this right now, I guarantee you your customers only use 10 to 20% of the functionality, whatever you sell them. So because that's how people, you know, use our stuff, that's how I believe people buy. They don't care about the whole thing, the slide deck. Nobody gives a shit about the entire presentation. They just care about the part that's most relevant to them, which is their priorities, which have changed. So we got to find out what that 20% is. And that's a great way to do that is by asking our existing customers. So let's bring customer success into this fold. And now let's address SDRs. Because this is what I called Trish about, that I was very concerned because I saw so many organizations just firing SDRs, like just slaughtering them. And I mean ones that have like successful SDRs too. Like I saw this one kid at Glassdoor who literally was the SDR of the year last year, and he posted his trophy, and he was like, you know, they just laid off the whole team basically. And so what do I do? And that's why I was like, all right, well, what's the deal here? And it, you know, kind of philosophy is, well, in a growth economy, the SDR role makes a lot of sense because it not only drives meetings, right, but it is a cost of sale, but it also produces future sales reps because it can help you scale and all that other stuff, right? But in a down economy, now all of a sudden the CFO is asking questions. Now all of a sudden, you know, the analytics matter. You know what I mean? And it's like we're looking at profitability going, all right, I don't see any profitability here. So let's shave that off. And AE is, hey, now you got to go prospect, right? And now you got these AEs who have been fat, dumb, and happy on SDRs and inbounds, fumbling their way through prospecting, and it's almost embarrassing, right? So how can we leverage this group? How can we actually, we have a group of people who are trained to gather information. Okay. And if you skip down there, the priorities right now for anybody, okay, priorities right now for anybody, obviously revenue is number one. Number two is meetings that lead to revenue. So companies that are in the green, that new ICP. And then number three, which I think is extremely important right now, and this is something that Kate said, is data and insights. And we got a team that is trained to gather data and insights. I think we just need to shift them from going after quality meetings with tier one executives who don't want to talk to a 22, 23-year-old kid right now, right? Let's flip this upside down. And I learned this from Jeff. I've been thinking about this for a while, but Jeff Hoffman, he put this out there during one of his webinars, and he talked about how in a growth economy, normal rules apply, right? You go top down, right? And you can go up, you can do some research, find a trigger, right? Look at somebody's 10K annual report, make some connections to that, and say, hey, executive, I got the solution that'll help you achieve what you're trying to achieve. Let's have a conversation, right? And executives in a regular growth economy are willing to make decisions that are not necessarily as popular to the entire organization because, look, I'm an executive. I understand. I have a vision for 2 to 3 years out, and you might not have that insight. So therefore, I'm making this decision on behest of the company, and we're going to go from there, right? But people might not be thrilled. In a down economy, nobody's willing to make an unpopular decision, right? And that's why you notice like a lot of our existing customer or a lot of our meetings right now are coming from existing people who already know us, right? Cold right now is brutal. And so with that insights, right? Why not go bottom up? Why not, instead of like going up here, why not start gaining insights here and going bottom up instead of top down? So from a popular decision standpoint, what we've shifted is we have Morgan and James. So James is the SDR, Morgan's the AE. We're picking one account once a week. What James is doing is he's calling into the lower levels, like literally frontline salespeople, going back to who knows, right? We're calling into frontline salespeople, not to sell them, to gain insights. And right, so we're stocking. So the goal is 10 to 20 individual rep calls every single week into one of our tier one accounts. And he's doing that. And he's also researching the account, grabbing whatever triggers and information he can find. And at the end of the week, they get together, Morgan and James, and say, okay, what did we learn? Now, the following week, Morgan then uses that information to go up top and have those conversations with the executives to say, hey, we've been talking to 10, 15, 20 of your reps. And what they're telling us is their main challenges are this, and what they really wish they had was these. And we have a solution to address that. Would you be open to having that conversation? Now the executive turns back to the employees and says, this is something you guys really need or want? Yes, we do. Popular decision, easier to make. And so while Morgan's like, James is going, gathering information, flips it to Morgan. Morgan then goes up here. Now, the following week, while Morgan's going up here, we're picking another account. James is gathering insights down here. Same thing with unleashing your SDRs on your existing customers to do surveys about what's that 20%. What's the 20% of your product that they really like and can't live without in today's world, right? Let's go find that out so that we can tell those stories to everybody else and go find out who those people are. So I know we're coming up on time, and Jeff, I don't know how much time we have for Q&A here. But look, if you want some free consulting here, John M. Barrows on Instagram, that's where I'm doing all my free consulting. If you have any questions at all, I'm trying to do my best to stay at least, like I said, a half a step ahead here. So hit me up on Instagram. Also, we just launched our brand new on-demand platform here. It's like Netflix for sales. So there's a ton of awesome, everything that we do in there, everything that I do as far as training for Salesforce and LinkedIn and Slack and all those companies, that's in there for $420 a year. Full, one license, $420. And for sales assembly here, if you go to ondemand.jbarrows.com and put in sales assembly, you'll get a 25% discount. So I think that's like $300 and something bucks, $380 or something like that. And happy to answer any questions that anybody has here, Jeff. But how are we doing? Oh, you're on mute. Jeff, we're on mute. Yep.
Awesome, brother. That was great, man. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Really appreciate all the insights. Yeah, we definitely have some questions here that have gotten submitted that I'll kind of rattle off as we wrap things up. And I love how you're making the trend of away from the Uber for X to the Netflix of X. So you're a trendsetter, my man.
Yeah, I'm trying, man. Like I said, trying to stay half a step ahead.
That's right. Cool. So a couple of questions here. You talked a little bit about video and some of the success that you guys are seeing with video. There was no specific question other than, can you just explain or talk a little bit more about your overall strategy for using video, primarily on LinkedIn or in emails?
Yeah, so we're using video actually all over the place right now. Prospecting, obviously, but a lot of this has to do with personas too. Like, you got to understand who your persona is. If you're going after IT and security, video is probably not going to be that great for you. But if you're going after sales and marketing, video, right, is probably going to be a higher response rate. But I wouldn't do it as first, because they got to get to know you first. So I would do, it's all about your cadence, right? It's about the story that we tell these people. And we got to get away from, unfortunately right now what's happening is people are either doing one thing, right? So they're sending one kick-ass email or one video and then saying, oh, it didn't work. Or they're putting together a piece of shit cadence that is just a templated, hey, did you get my first email, bubbling this one up to the top type of crap, right? There's a middle ground here of caring about your story and figuring out what that story needs to be to the person that you send it out to. So what we do is, just to give you a sense here from a prospecting standpoint, the first thing that we do is I take my 25 accounts. I got 25 accounts once a quarter that I go after, tier 1 accounts. And we go after 3 personas. So it's VPs of sales, CROs, and VPs of enablement. So that's 75 people. The first thing I do during the beginning of the quarter is I go look on LinkedIn to see how active are those 75 people. And I comment or share on something that they did in the past month or so. Then as soon as I find somebody that I can comment or share on, then I immediately go LinkedIn request to them. And I usually say something like, hey, just saw your recent post on whatever it is. Would love to get some more of your stuff in my feed, something like that, right? And so out of the 75 people, usually 50 are pretty active. Of those 50, I send invites to. About 30 of them accept. Those 30 go into one cadence. The other 45 go into a different one. But then what I do is I go on their website, I do some research, I fire off a tailored email, I make a phone call to support that, and then I go back on LinkedIn and I try to find something to make a connection to, and then I do the video. And the reason I go through that succession is because, again, you have to be one connected to them. You can't do this to secondary or tertiary ones. And so now hey, Jeff, what's up, man? I've been learning a little bit more about what you guys are doing over at Sales Assembly. And I noticed you're trying to expand your operations across the country right now, which is fantastic. And I was wanted to talk to you because we actually have a platform that you could use to help everybody collaborate in those different areas. And I was wondering if you'd be open to a brief conversation, because we're also working with other, organizations like blah, blah, blah. So, give me a ping back, right? So very similar to what I would send in an email or voicemail. I'm just using a video because people are asking, John, how do you show empathy? You show it, right? But you don't be cheesy about it. Like, I'm begging you, don't use video and putting that stupid whiteboard that says Jeff superimposed. You know what I mean? And when Jeff opens it up being like, hey, thanks for opening up my video, I really appreciate it. That's bullshit. That's just like spam. But if you personalize it, so that's on the application side for prospecting. Another application for video is dealing with objections, right? Somebody objects to you. Hey, take me off your list. Hey, I'm not interested. Fire up a quick video. Hey, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to just, spam you with a message here. There is a reason I wanted to reach out to you. I did a little bit of homework and this is why. Or, John, you're too expensive. Hey, I just wanted to let you know, want to get a little bit of understanding what you mean by too expensive, because you said blah, blah, blah. And that to me was like a multi-million-dollar issue. And now I'm telling you I got a solution for 20 grand and you're telling me I'm too expensive. Like, what am I missing here, right? And then the other way that we love it is we actually deliver proposals through video. So say, Jeff, you're my point of contact and you're blocking me from getting to your, whatever, your CEO or whatever. I mean, I know you are, but you know what I mean? Like, you're blocking me from getting to power, and I want to present to power. Well, instead of, and I'll do everything I can to figure out, hey, Jeff, how can we work this together? And can I present? What I'll do is I'll actually put together a video, and we use Vidyard, where I'll have my little bubble on the screen, and I'll have your proposal up, and I'll say, hey, Jeff, instead of just sending the PDF here, I just kind of want to walk you through some of the highlights of the proposal that we put together here for you. And by the way, if you want to send this to Sarah, CEO, whatever, feel free, because this kind of walks you through it. And Sarah, by the way, if you're watching this, I just want to let you know, Jeff's been fantastic to work with. Oh man, he's such a great steward of your business, kissing your ass a little bit. And then you start, and then you just highlight the real reason, here are the priorities. You don't go into the details. You just, hey, you said the main priorities were X, and this is the components of our solution, 20% that align with that. Feel free to email me if you got any questions about this stuff. That right there, we've gotten like 5 or 6 customers just by doing that. So there's a few use cases there that you can use on video.
Dude, I love it. That's all great stuff, man. Really, really helpful. And for those of you that don't follow John, if you're not one of the 350 or 1,000 people or whatever that follow John on LinkedIn, and Morgan and the others on his team, you should definitely do that. They're always posting really great stuff, and you always pick up some nuggets just from whatever strategy they're deploying. So good stuff. I got another question here. Going to kind of put you on the spot to kind of do some prediction, but
Yep.
just based on the fact that you guys always seem to be kind of at the cutting edge and thinking innovative around go-to-market strategies and how companies really need to be focused on driving sales and revenue. Can you predict one strategy that you think B2B organizations aren't even thinking about right now that, say, 6 months from now might be a much more effective prospecting or go-to-market tool or strategy?
Virtual reality. I think that this has jump-started virtual reality in a way of getting an experience. Everybody's looking for an experience when it comes to buying something, right? Nobody likes to click around a website. Nobody likes to, read through PDFs and documents and stuff like that. That's why I don't know about you, Jeff, like when I go look at a product these days, the first thing that I look for is a video, right? I look for a video to show me how does this product work, right? When somebody gives me a demo, like I feel rude because I'm your typical jackass CEO. If I don't see any value in the conversation that you're having with me to kick off this demo, I'm immediately going to say, could you just show it to me? Because I just need to see it myself, right? So I think virtual reality is going to be huge. I'm actually starting to experiment, Oculus, and I have those at home just to kind of feel like what it's like in those. We're not investing in it right now at Jay Barrows, but I want to see what the possibilities are of virtual reality. And I think, for instance, like trade shows and those type of things, there's going to be virtual reality trade shows where you create an avatar of yourself and you all of a sudden walk around and we are face-to-face meeting right now, or I can walk you through it. And I think that that's going to be an extremely unique way of like sending a client some Google goggles or something like that when they become cheap enough and saying, hey, put these things on and see how badass our stuff is. That would be my prediction if outside of the regular stuff like videos and sending shit in the mail and going back to some of the basics and whatever else. But I think virtual reality I think this whole COVID thing gave virtual reality a whole kick in the ass from a business perspective.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I personally think fax machines are going to be making a strong comeback here later this year, but VR, fax, we'll see who's right.
I did a training for a company recently that literally does fax. I mean, it's for hospitals, like kind of an old school industry and stuff like that, but they have a fax solution. I'm like, are you shitting me? Like, do you really sell faxes? And they're like, yep. I'm like, wow, I am out of touch here with what is still around because I didn't think those things were still available even.
Yeah, don't even get me started about how many times I've reached out to my friends that are in the healthcare industry and asked them how they still operate on faxes and pagers. Okay, last question that we have here, and then we'll call it a day. I know this is something that you have a lot of opinions on, but just you want to share a little bit about your views of the future of the SDR in a B2B tech environment.
Yeah, so I kind of, this is why, again, I go back to why I called Trish to help me figure this out. I think this, I've always said this, I've always said that the SDR role as it stands today, I start all my presentations off with death of the average sales rep, right? And I mean that as far as the average sales reps who are going through the motions, the ones who are just push and play on cadences, asking Bant questions, press and play on demos and all that other stuff, we're getting replaced by technology. Right. But I thought it was going to be a gradual replacement over the course of 10 years. Right. COVID comes, punches us all square in the mouth. And I think it's everybody's reassessing right now. My opinion is, and what I'm seeing is, I think the SDR and BDR role are going to continuously move further and further over to sales and marketing and become more of a data role where it's using tools but analyzing, going back to being a scientist, open rates, click-throughs, those type of things, right? And really roll up under sales and marketing. Marketing and operations. And we're going to move back to full inside sales, right? So where inside sales supported by ABM, like account-based marketing, that the SDRs and the BDRs are going to be part of, but it's not going to be it's no longer to be looked at as the feeder system for sales. Yes, obviously some sales, AEs will flush out of that, but I actually think it's going to be far more administrative. Because look, the phone is going to get harder and harder and harder, right? You know what I mean? So it's not going to be as necessary for people to just be hammering the phones anymore, email and social, and really, and playing to the strengths of the audience that's coming out of school right now, right? I mean, the audience that's coming out of school right now, they grew up on apps and looking at and making connections and, whatever that is. So let's play to that strength, right? So let's let them do that, but then let's graduate more over to full inside sales where you take that lead, or, you take it from beginning to end and close it out and get in leverage with your pod, if you will. So I just think it's going to move in that direction. And it's going to be less and less about being an SDR as an entry-level role. It still will probably an entry-level role, but it's not going to necessarily be the entry-level role to sales. I think it's going to be the entry-level role to business. And then that rep can then decide, do they want to go into marketing, sales, or operations? And I think most of them are probably going to go into marketing or operations because of it.
Interesting. Great stuff, man. Well, I think we'll call that a day. Thank you, John, for taking the time this morning. And again, thanks to our panel from earlier for participating. Just to wrap, we'll be sending out a recap email in about an hour with a recording of the video, along with some other information with some calls to action for some of our partners from today's event. And then this was the first of 7 of these that we're doing throughout the week. The next one is for the LA market coming up in about an hour. And then tomorrow we have New York and Seattle. Thursday we have San Francisco. And then we wrap things up on Friday with Austin and Denver. So if you enjoyed this morning and you want to participate in some of the other programs, please feel free to sign up for some of the other events coming up. There'll be a link in the follow-up email that goes out here in a little bit, directing you to how to do that. And again, thanks so much for joining us. Hope everyone has a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.